Unlike Amazon, AliExpress shows you the number of units sold of any particular item, and it was this that grabbed my attention and made me wonder, what do people find appealing about a device worth about 40 or 50 US dollars? So I bought one and it ended up being good. In a previous video, I took a look at the R36S. I spent some time testing it and playing with it, and it was certainly fun. But there was a small drawback for me. You see, back in my day, I used to play with the PS1 and later on moved on to the PSP. So that's what I was comfortable with the most. The R36S does the job to a degree and plays all my favorite games, but I wanted something closer to my past experience ergonomically. A device with a screen in the middle and buttons and grip on the sides, and shoulder buttons that's a bit more comfortable to hold. So I went with the RG35XX Edge from a company called Anbernic. At around 55 US dollars, it's relatively cheap, even cheaper than offerings from companies like Miu and AYN Technologies. I made sure not to check any reviews so I don't get influenced by what others say. Let's take a look and see what it can do. My first impression is that it's small, smaller than what I imagined it to be. Just for comparison, here it is next to a Samsung phone and some other random items. I went with the black color as it's my favorite color with most things, and I'm quite happy with the way it looks. White would have made it difficult to decide, but they only sell it in transparent white, which I'm not a fan of. You can also pick it up in transparent purple. The craftsmanship on the device is obvious from the get-go, and Anbernic seem to have good quality control. The finish is smooth and consistent, and there's no rough edges, and the weight distribution is good, making it comfortable to hold. The buttons are very good. In fact, I didn't pay attention to them at all, because they work as they should. No weird sounds, they have the right amount of click and no rattling in the D-pad and control buttons. They seem to be made from individual pieces instead of one big piece, and they're substantially better in quality compared to the R36S. The only thing that I remotely dislike is when you shake it, there's a rattling noise and it's caused by the shoulder buttons. I might be nitpicking here, as I think most people would not even notice it. Overall, I'm impressed so far with the build quality. It feels well made and not just some other random Chinese factory-made console to make use of pre-existing free emulators. Although the box that came with it feels a bit cheap, I'm glad they kept it that way, because if they spend money on a premium box, we have to pay for it. The screen is bright and crisp with accurate colors and has 5 levels of brightness, too bright for my low-light Sigma lens. What surprised me the most is the number of ports you have in this thing. So let's take a look at the physical features. You have the D-pad and the control buttons situated above the analog sticks. I much rather this layout versus consoles with the analog stick and the D-pad positions swapped, like you would see in an Xbox controller. You have the start button on the top right, the select button on the top left, a function button that's extremely useful to navigate the UI. Shoulder buttons are slightly different with the R2 and L2 placed on the inside of the R1 and L1. Usually you get them below, but with such thin device, it makes sense to place them the way they did, and it doesn't bother me at all. The only thing is, I wish they moved them a bit to the inside so the tip of my index would rest naturally on the R1 and L1. On the bottom, you have 2 SD card slots, one for the system and games, and the other is for games only. On top, you have 2 OTG slots, a headphone jack, a function button that can do things like help you exit games without restarting the device, which is not possible on the R36S, and a mini HDMI, which is commonly found on MacBooks, to display your gameplay externally, and I'm happy to report that it works and works well. And finally, on the back, you have 2 gripping rubber pads that also feels well made. Now, let's talk about the software experience. From the get-go, it's an absolute breeze to navigate through it. Very easy to use and you have this satisfying sound every time you press a button. When I bought it, I didn't expect it to have Wi-Fi, but I was pleasantly surprised that it has both Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. There's a couple of bugs I found during my use. The time and date seem to want to report the time the device was made and not the actual time and date. And no matter how much I try, it just doesn't want to change. The other bug is on the Bluetooth side. I was able to connect to a PS4 controller and it seemed to work, except it suffers from a continuous drop in connection, resulting in ghost clicks and making the controller unusable. I also tried to connect it with a USB cable, but for some reason, the only buttons that work is the right button on the D-pad. This was important for me to know, as I think being able to connect a controller could make this appealing to a lot of people. The console even recognizes if the controller is connected and how many are connected. So I bought a cheap USB controller and connected it, but the results are the same, unfortunately. Bluetooth seems to work best, but I think it was designed for connecting wireless headphones and requires higher speeds to be able to use a controller. In the video I made about the R36S, I talked about how some games are unplayable, and although it didn't affect any games that I cared about, I was wondering if the same thing is true with this device. Are there any games that doesn't work? And the answer is no. Every single game that I tested worked, and worked flawlessly. The difference is the number of games that come with the device is very small. I would say somewhere around 50. Now granted, that's because I ordered the cheapest option, which comes with a 64 GB card. But the good news is I was able to download every single PS1 game that I can think of, and every one of them worked. Not only that, it was extremely easy to download games. To save you the hassle of jumping to another video, let me show you how to download additional games. So what you want to do, you want to take off the SD card on the left side, and if required, use an SD card reader like this. The card reads just like any regular flash drive. Click to open and then go to ROMs. ROMs stands for read-only memory. It's just a way to refer to old CD games. So when you hear the word ROMs, it just means games. In the folder, you pick the console you want to add games for. Let's do the PS1 console. You will find it under PS. You will have pre-installed games. Notice there are 3 types of extensions of files that will work. You have CHD, PBP, and bin. Keep this folder opened and go to google.com. In google.com, type download PS1, PSX. PS1 and PSX are the same thing. ROMs. And then hit search. You will be greeted with countless numbers of websites that you can download games from. I will not be showing or naming any of them as it's considered a form of piracy, but it's pretty easy to find. They don't always have the games you want from the get-go, so go through several of them until you find the ones you want. Once you have downloaded them, save them in a location you want. Before copying them to the ROMs folder on your SD card, make sure that they're unzipped. There are a few programs that you can use to unzip, like WinRAR, WinZip, and 7Z. Some zipped folders will only work with a specific program that was originally used to actually zip it. So experiment with a few of them before you declare the game as unusable. Once you have unzipped the game to the readable extension, like I showed you earlier, simply copy it to the PS folder. To add an image or thumbnail to the game, choose a photo you want to designate. Let's say I want to pick this one from Wikipedia. You can either save it or do the following. Use your sniping tool, take a snippet, open MS Paint, paste the image, Control S, and as you will see, you'll be able to save it. Save it for now as any name you wish. So just put any name. And by default, the extension is PNG. And this is what we care about. and then bring the game or bring the photo here and then click paste. And then what you want to do, you want to click rename and then name it exactly word for word, letter for letter, capital letters, case sensitive, and so on, as the game you wish to designate it for. I'll just show you a quick example. You will see here Alien Trilogy and then brackets USA. And then you will see here Alien Trilogy USA. Here's an example of what the final result looks like. And that's it. You now have games with pictures to make it more presentable and easier to find. For other consoles, follow the same steps. Just make sure to use a readable format for the console you wish to download games for. If you want to know what format or what extension the game uses, again, pick one of the games or pick one of the consoles. Let's click Pico here. You'll see it says P8. So pay attention to that when you're downloading the games for this particular console. Since buying it, I started to gradually spend more time on it. The software and hardware feels like it was made by the same company. The easy layout of menus and options, the smooth gameplay, the small size that allows you to tuck it away in your pants or jeans, the ease of downloading new games, not to mention that it's completely free, makes this device a very compelling buy. I'm glad these devices exist and that there isn't a huge hype around them, and that the company that makes them isn't spending money on advertising it, which in return keeps it at a very affordable price. Honestly, for me it's still difficult to believe that a device with this level of quality sells at this price point. And yes, the fact that it uses third-party emulators plays a part in keeping it cheap. I will leave a link in the description if you wish to pick one up for yourself. It seems to be selling anywhere from $50 to $60 at any given time. You can also check my video on the R36S by clicking on the card on the top right. That's the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.